Welcome to the Rusted Garden Homestead. This video is all about identifying the patterns that are on your tomato plant leaves, so you know if you have a fungal issue where you need to spray, or you have an issue where you don't really need to worry about it, or maybe you need to water more because the leaves are just naturally dying off. Everything you see here is not the dreaded late blight. When you look online and you look up pictures of leaf issues on your tomato plants, everybody starts screaming at you, it's late blight, it's late blight. That pattern right down there, that's just normal die-off, and some plant varieties will do that when the heat of the summer comes. We'll come back and we'll take a look at all these leaves. I'm going to just show you the different patterns of markings on my tomato plant leaves and help you identify what they are. This is also a sponsored video. I've been affiliated with HoseLink for 5 years, and this is the 5th year that I've had this 82-foot retractable hose by HoseLink in my garden. And I just wanted to go over one thing. It is holding up beautifully. Not even really fading. The hose is in perfect condition. It is really worth spending the money to get a retractable hose. And the beauty of a retractable hose is you just give it a pull and it's going to retract. And I'm just going to let this go as we, finish out the video. It retracts itself. I've got this old archaic hose holder right here, and I got tired of having to drag an 82-foot hose and put it on here all the time. It was just ugly. I highly recommend the HoseLink. Extremely durable, going into its 5th season, and it works really, really well. The tomato plants down here have less of an issue. And again, if it was late blight whips through your plants really quickly, so all these plants would have issues. Let's go over to a smaller determinate variety, and I want to show you what leaf spot and potentially early blight looks like on your tomato plant leaves. This is a great example of what leaf spots, a fungal issue, and early blight, also a fungal issue, looks like on tomato plant leaves. Notice there's not a whole lot of yellowing across the leaf, but there's all these little spots on there. And when we get closer, we're going to see that the spots are really rings inside of rings inside of rings, or concentric circles. And that's the sign that it's a fungal issue. Those rings are the growing fungus, and they leave, perfect rings on there. Let me pull up an example here. You can see how there's concentric circles where it's brown, circles within circles, and around the outer part of that is a yellow halo. That's usually a sign that there's an active fungus, and that's when you would want to spray. You actually want to start spraying before the diseases show up. If you're new to gardening, just take notes when you start seeing patterns like this. Let's see if we can find a better example. Here's a leaf that's dying off, and again, you can see the pattern right there. You want to start spraying 2 weeks before these diseases typically show up in your garden, and that prevents them from getting hold, and it ends up doing less damage to your plant. If you start spraying when they show up, you can take care of it, but a lot of times the fungal issue has spread to good leaves. I don't even really remove the leaves that have fungi on them, because they've already probably created spores and now they're on your clean leaves. You want to get in and you want to spray. I'll be showing you how to use hydrogen peroxide spray, how to mix it. Check out the video description. I have an old video that tells you how to do that. But the hydrogen peroxide basically cleans the leaves and kills off the fungi and the spores that are growing on there. And I like to do that first before I put down my antifungal, like baking soda. And that will just clean up the plant. I'll talk more about that. And maybe just try and get more of a close-up so you can see what those rings look like. That's what you're looking for. Just plain old brown spots on your tomato leaves with no rings doesn't mean it's a fungal issue. This kind of pattern is really nothing to worry about. The leaves are turning yellow. That's not a fungal issue. They're dying off some brown spots. This is really done by user error. I just didn't water this enough. Actually went away. With the July temperatures getting into the 90s, these plants just didn't have enough water. One of the things you want to do is when you start seeing leaf patterns change and look something like that, it's usually heat related. So watering more can help, mulching more can help, and even putting down a shade cloth can help. And different tomato plant varieties may or may not show this. The ones in your garden that quickly show yellowing and have trouble with the heat, well, maybe you don't want to grow them next year, so try a different variety. But as we go through my garden, you'll see plants in different sort of stages of this. The pattern here, the yellowing on my cherry tomato plant, that is nothing to worry about. That's due to the heat, lack of watering. And if you're worried, if your plants are starting to look like that, just showing a pattern where they yellow and, brown out and die off Give them a little extra water-soluble nitrogen, maintain the water. Again, mulching and shade cloth can really help and make a difference. Sometimes on your plant you'll see a pattern like this. That's nothing really to worry about. If you have a magnifying glass, it's good to carry it in the garden just in case you have spider mites or something on the underside, you know, sucking the sap out of the leaf. Really nothing to worry about. Here's a little pattern on here. That ring or that browning is not concentric circle, so I am not worried about that being a fungal issue. Late blight now can sort of look like this, but usually there's lesions on there. It's got, you know, kind of gray marks. When you turn it over, there could be a fuzz on there. This just doesn't look like late blight. And I just want to be clear, you have early blight, which is this concentric rings, and you have late blight, which is more lesions on the leaves, browning, some circular pattern. It just looks really different, and you're going to see kind of a cotton-like substance sometimes, the fungal growth on the undersides. And late blight really devastates your plants quickly. It just doesn't show up in a little spot and hang out. It just covers stuff quickly. And I would see it across all my plants. Again, looking in here, that's just normal die-off from the heat. Nothing to worry about. This plant's having all kinds of issues. It's got distorted leaves. That's a whole other video series, but they're pretty green. The plant's working it out. It's starting to flower. As we come down here, lots of die-off, and part of it was, you know, whatever's going on distorting and twisting these leaves. This is not leaf curling. Leaf curling is normal. This is something different. Affected the leaves down here, the heat, just natural die-off. This is not a fungal issue. This is not something I can spray or really treat. I can give the plant some water-soluble nitrogen, help it along, hope that it works it out as it continues to grow. Here's an example of a really healthy plant. If I had late blight, early blight, or leaf spot in my garden, it's going to really be everywhere. It just doesn't show up on one plant and then leave the rest of your plants alone. The spores float in the air. They tend to show up in gardens. If you get it once, you're going to get it again. So you do want to have a plan on how you really treat and manage your tomato plants. I have a lot of videos. Please subscribe. I've already done a couple on them, but real quick, at a certain height, maybe 2 or 3 feet, I spray my plants with an aspirin spray. You can look up aspirin on my YouTube channel. That helps the plant fight off fungus and other issues. It basically tricks the plant in thinking that it's attacked. Aspirin mimics a hormone. Your plant toughens up and it makes it harder for fungal spores to establish. It only works on tomato plants. The other thing I do is I spray pretty regularly now with hydrogen peroxide. I let these plants go a little bit for the demonstration purposes, and I knew that it wasn't, you know, a huge issue. About every 2 weeks, starting July 1, I will spray them with hydrogen peroxide just to clean off the leaves, clean off any fungal issues that are showing up. I usually get leaf spot earlier in the season if it shows up, and I get early blight about now. I don't really get late blight in my garden. Spraying every 2 weeks with hydrogen peroxide works for me, works in my garden. It may be something you want to do. Always test spray. Spray a couple of leaves, wait 48 hours, but I will link that video in the video description. The other thing I do is after I spray, a day or two later, I will put down baking soda or some other antifungal. Hydrogen peroxide cleans the leaves. It's gone in a day or two at most. The antifungal, like baking soda, changes the pH on the leaves, makes it harder for fungi spores or fungal spores to get on there, multiply and do their thing. So I'm really using 2 different ways to manage the plants. This plant looks pretty good. You know, some die-off down there again, and I'm not really worried about that. I'm not going to remove the leaves. I'm going to come in and I'm going to spray everything with hydrogen peroxide. I'll show you that. And then I will spray it the same way with the baking soda and get this plant, you know, protected. Even though I'm not worried about it, it doesn't mean you shouldn't start spraying. As these leaves, again, get weak and damaged, fungi can get onto them and start doing their thing. But the fungus isn't strong enough to really get onto a healthy leaf. So weakening tomato leaves may get really beat up. That doesn't mean it's going to spread through your entire plant. Best practice, have a prevention plan of spraying already set up. So I'm not too worried about this guy. I'm not even going to remove the leaves. Again, if it was a major fungal issue affecting healthy green leaves, I would see it across this whole grouping of plants. Coming into here, I have leaf curling. I just did a video on that if you want to check it out. Perfectly normal, nothing to worry about. Leaves are changing, getting a little bit light, yellow. Nothing of concern in here. That's a perfectly normal pattern of die-off. You don't have to worry. Again, when that die-off starts, you may get something that looks like that. But you're really looking for concentric rings inside of rings, to tell you that it's a fungal issue. This one's a little bit more beat up, but again, something I'm not worried about. And finally, going down to here, and leaf spots and stuff can get onto different plants. This is a bean plant. So just because you have a disease on a tomato plant doesn't mean it's going to jump over to your bean plant. Just because you have a disease on your bean plant doesn't mean it's going to jump over to your tomato plant. This guy just looks really beat up, and there's lots of die-off. And even when you look at this, there are some concentric rings in there, but it's not all over the place. Like, this is just browning right there. But I'm going to give this a spray with the hydrogen peroxide. This pattern, that pattern. It looks scary. You don't have to run for the hills. And I don't even take the leaves off anymore. I just want to be clear with that. If this was a fungal issue, the spores are going to be on the green leaves, and you can't remove everything. Just hit them with that hydrogen peroxide. It makes all the difference. When you have a blight, let's be clear. When you have late blight, it's usually on a green leaf. And you see the brown pattern, you'll see lesions on there, you'll see some circling on there, and you'll see that, white cotton-like growth on the underside. It spreads really quickly. Slowly yellowing leaves is really normal, and it's probably the point of the video. Like, this is not a fungal issue, it's just plant die-off. Hope that gives you some confidence, or at least confidence to ease your worry. As scary as that looks, it's not always a fungal issue that's going to wipe out your crops. So, to recap, the heat of the summer can cause this issue. Increase your watering, put down mulch. I like to use grass clippings. If you're in a place where it gets into the upper 90s and 100s, you definitely want to use shade cloth. Have a plan in place. I like using hydrogen peroxide. I'm going to come and soak all these. I'll show you this before we wrap up, or I'll show you that before we wrap up. It's pretty straightforward. And then I'm going to get into my regular spraying every 7 to 14 days, depending on the time of the year and where you are. You would spray your antifungal, like baking soda. You can use any antifungal. There isn't one that I feel is better. The main idea is that the gardener just has to stick to a routine, and that's what makes all the difference. All right, let's put down the hydrogen peroxide. I have several 1-gallon sprayers. I don't like mixing hydrogen peroxide with other chemicals, other fungicides. Sometimes when you mix chemicals together, you just don't get the response that you want. I've had this HoseLink out here for 4 years, so it's been in the elements 24/7. Very durable, holds up. It's a wonderful addition to your garden. When spraying the hydrogen peroxide, I like to start at the top. And just really, you're taking the time to really soak down the top sides, the undersides of the leaves, and really coat it on there. The best time to spray, early morning like now, later in the evening. You don't really want to be spraying in direct sunlight. And the hydrogen peroxide is going to really clean the leaf. And I would just work my way down. This is why I leave the leaves on there, because any kind of fungal issue that might be like right on there is being killed off with the hydrogen peroxide. Again, check out the video description for the link, and also keyword search my channel if you want to find out how I make the baking soda spray. And I would just go through and thoroughly soak down all my plants. That's what I'm going to do today with the hydrogen peroxide. In about a day or two, I'm going to put down the baking soda, and that will kind of protect them going forward. Hydrogen peroxide kills off the active fungus. Baking soda, other fungicides, keep your plants protected so new fungi don't take hold onto the plants. Thanks so much for watching. Please check out my seed shop at therustedgarden.com. And just because you see yellowing leaves, it doesn't mean your plant has a fungal issue or it's dying off. Thanks for watching.